Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The next session will begin in 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The next session is about to begin.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Danube Room. Please welcome your host, Matthew Karnitschnig.
Good afternoon and welcome to our next session, which has been a regular feature of GlobeSec over the years. Now or never, unlocking the European future for the Western Balkans. And I would like to bring on our distinguished panelists now to the stage before I introduce them. So I'd like to begin with Milo Đukanović, the president of Montenegro, somebody who will be a very familiar face to many of you here today and tuning in online. President Đukanović has been involved in Montenegrin politics since the 1980s, first became prime minister in 1991, has celebrated a few jubilees of his own over the years. You might say he's the queen of the Balkans, as it were. We also have Dimitar Kovachevski, who's the Prime Minister of North Macedonia, with us. We have Albin Kurti, the Prime Minister of Kosovo. Miroslav Lajčák, who's a very familiar face for our Slovak friends here, the former Foreign Minister of Slovakia, who is now the EU Special Representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue and other Western Balkan regional issues. We also have Sir Stuart Peach, who is Special Envoy to the Western Balkans of the United Kingdom. And I am Matthew Karnitschnig, the Chief Europe Correspondent for Politico. Just a couple of housekeeping points. Everyone has a headset, or should do, on their seat. I suggest that you turn that on now. President Đukanović will be speaking in Montenegrin, and the English translation will be on channel 2. And again, if anybody would like to ask questions, you can do so via the app, or we will have a live question and answer session at the end. But Ambassador Lajčák, I'd like to begin with you to get sort of a regional view from your perspective now in Brussels. As I said before, this is something that we have discussed almost at every GlobeSec. When are the Western Balkans actually going to have a real perspective of joining the EU? And we really haven't moved much further along that road. What we hear a lot of, as we heard a couple of weeks ago when you were in Berlin with Prime Minister Kurti, as well as with President Vučić, who's not here today but was here yesterday, are statements like this from Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Germany, who said, "It is in the interest of the region and the EU that the 6 Western Balkan countries have a perspective of becoming full EU member states." And yet, it just seems those hopes are constantly being dashed. And I want to ask you, why hasn't the EU, because this is the perception in the region, why hasn't the EU lived up to its promises?
Yes, you are right that the Western Balkans has been on the agenda of GlobeSec for, I think, every year, and we have repeated more or less the same messages, but right now the situation is different. Yes, the developments in the last 5 more years have not been very positive. There was a decreased commitment from the European Union towards the Western Balkans. Lack of enthusiasm, maybe even absence of a consensus when it comes to full membership of the region. And at the same time, there was a wrong perception that the region can wait. The region is in the safe place already, and there is nothing bad that can happen to the region. So that's why we don't have to be in a hurry. We can fix our problems first and then deal with the region. Now, this has changed because the European Union is losing popularity and credibility in the region dramatically, and I can tell you that it's more and more difficult to sit in the panels like this in the region to represent the European Union, because when years back we were sort of lecturing, now we are being criticized by our partners. But the dramatic game changer is the Russia's war against Ukraine, because this has changed everything. And with all the tragedies, it is also a bit of good news for the Western Balkans, because the war in Ukraine, Russia's aggression in Ukraine, made the process of enlargement political again. Everybody understands this is not a technical exercise. It's not about clusters and ticking boxes, but it's really about alignment. It's about this region being part of us, sharing our values, and speaking the same voice. There is also an understanding that we do not have the luxury to leave the region in the limbo between 2 realities. They need to end up as full members of the European Union. So there is a feeling of urgency. There is a lots of goodwill. Now the question is whether we will be able to turn this goodwill into a new reality, new quality. So the goodwill is there, but we are still struggling. We are also struggling, to be very honest with you, how to demonstrate our willingness to bring Ukraine closer, but to do it not to the detriment of our Western Balkans partners who have been part of this process for many years. And we shall get the answers on the 23rd of this month. And what I would like to encourage our partners from the region is to help the European Union to make the right decision.
Well, I would like to bring in Prime Minister Kovachevski on this, because you have sort of felt the brunt of the false promises from Brussels over the years, sir. I think you have the longest candidate status of any country other than Turkey. What do you feel now when you look at the discussion about the Ukraine, and what is your sort of sense of what this will mean for your own country's EU perspective?
Well, thank you for the question. It is a very valid question, especially when you take it from a perspective of a country which has 17 years of candidate status. And I will put it from the perspective of North Macedonia, and then in light of the other countries which you mentioned. So the EU accession was supposed to be a merit-based process, where a country should embed the European Union values as very important: democracy, economic prosperity, and social justice. In our case, 45% of the legislation is already harmonized. And if you compare the country with other countries which are already negotiating for quite a years, then on different chapters we are doing quite better. And if you take the five last reports of the European Commission about the progress of the country, then they are all fully positive. The problem is that a merit-based process has become a typical political process, where due to the decision-making process of the European Union, one country can block the accession of a candidate country, which happens in the case of North Macedonia, and this to be done based on a pure political basis and reasons. On the other side, we have a new geopolitical momentum, and absolutely a picture in Europe where EU, as Miroslav said, has to decide on the way how to keep its credibility and its relevance in the Western Balkans region. Because if it is a merit-based system, and it is practically stated like this by all the relevant representatives of the European Union, then it has to be merit-based for all the countries. I am aware that, and we are all aware that there has to be a clear vision also for Ukraine, for Georgia, for Moldova, because these countries and the citizens of the countries want to have a democratic society. They want to choose their future as a economic prosperous states with social justice for all the citizens and the freedom of critical thinking, which are values of the European Union. And normally that this has to be supported by everyone, and we showed as a country and as a region our support to the Ukrainian people and to the Ukrainian government. But on the other side, now the European Union has two problems on the table. One is the decisions about the Western Balkans, where if there is no decision, the credibility goes down, the relevance goes down, and at the moment when they go down, the nationalism grows up, which is especially imminent for the Western Balkans region, and we do not want to have that. On the other side, the process for Moldova, Georgia, Ukraine will be probably a different process, which practically we can see from statements of the presidency of the European Union and some other representatives of EU institutions, as a process for countries which still do not have the capacity and capability to start, let's say, a fully fledged negotiation or accession process. So the key decision now is to start and to send a message, a clear message, with a bold decision for the Western Balkan countries on the way forward after June. This is what I would have to say.
But coming to you, President Đukanović, your country is seen by many as being further along this road towards EU accession as well. You also in Montenegro have felt the brunt of Russian intervention. Do you see now, after Ukraine, more willingness by the EU to push this process forward, or are you just hearing more of the same of what you've been told over the past years?
Well, objectively speaking, Montenegro is the forerunner and is most advanced in the negotiations with the European Union. And I think it's closest to closing negotiation chapters, and that when European Union decides to accept new members, Montenegro could be among the first ones to be admitted into the European Union. That's a fact. But this should not blur our view from the key problem. And the key problem is what Mr. Lajčák mentioned. It is so obvious that European Union had a lack of enthusiasm and a lack of dedication to its own enlargement policy and integration of the Western Balkans in the last 5 or 6 years. And this logically resulted in the lack of reform enthusiasm in the governments and societies of the countries of the Western Balkans. So unfortunately, we found ourselves in the situation where we have a balance of the lack of powerlessness, and we accuse European Union, they accuse Western Balkans, and the only ones who profited were the third parties. So those third parties expectedly took the geopolitical empty space, because you can't have any vacuum in geopolitics. But the problem is that the third parties entered that space with expressly anti-European platform. Western Balkans is not a primary goal of Russian destruction. The primary target for Russian destruction is European system of values and European security, and that is attacked from every part of European continent. Western Balkan is a very good soil for that, because in the Western Balkans we still have weak states, and in the Western Balkans Russia always counts on the pro-Russian sentiments that Russia can manipulate with, successfully achieving its goals. And the goal is to stop those countries on their path towards European Union and Euro-Atlantic Alliance. As a result of the lack of attention from the European Union, I think that in the end we got the aggression of Russia against Ukraine. Because you are right, we had warnings in the Western Balkans. In 2016, Russia attempted a coup in Montenegro with the same goal, to stop Montenegro from joining NATO. They did not succeed at that time. Montenegro is a member of NATO, but the Russian hybrid warfare continued in the Western Balkans. Today, Russia is only using much more brutal range of instruments in Ukraine, but they have the same goal. Russia wants to stop Ukraine from becoming a member of NATO and European Union. You registered well that the reflection of that was new unity and new determination and new efficiency of European Union. It was a response, and that is something that is encouraging. And we were all happy to hear and see that European Union showed stronger robustness to protect its own system of values and its security, and showed us that it really has more serious intentions to get a better position on the geopolitical level. I think it's very important now to keep European Union on that course. I think that Prime Minister Kovachevski said the right thing. For us in the Western Balkans, there is something that we desperately need. We need a unique one-voice message from the European Union. Not a new message, but the original message of the European Union. The European Union used to say this message, but they forgot about it. And the message is, every country of the Western Balkans has its place in the European Union, and every country can take its place when it reaches the standards and implements the reforms properly. So, European Union has to continue with the regatta policy, encouraging competitiveness areas in the Western Balkans, so that we all can become full-fledged members of the European Union according to the same rules. I have to admit that something that we can hear in the last 10 days actually leads us to the idea that we have to be very concerned. It reminds us of former practice of the European Union, and it actually leads us to the conclusion that we might go back very soon to the situation where we have various and different messages from various addresses to the Western Balkans. We hope that it will not happen. We think that it is very important not to discourage further the Euro enthusiasm in the Western Balkans. You should not encourage opposition to the European part of the Western Balkans, because it was encouraged a lot in the years where we had a lack of engagement of the European Union. Now we have hesitations in the Western Balkans when it comes to its European future. The Western Balkans now needs a clear message, and I said what the message should be. But if we keep seeing various, diverse messages and ideas that one country will become a full member, one country will be an associate member, one will have a gradual membership, etc., etc., I think it will only contribute to the confusion in the Western Balkans, and it will be the path for the Western Balkans just to remain distrustful towards its European future and very fruitful soil for various influences that are anti-European.
Thank you for that, sir. I think one of the things we hear often in Brussels is that a real stumbling block to pushing forward is the situation between Kosovo and Serbia. Prime Minister Kurti, you were in Berlin last month with President Vučić and with Ambassador Lajčák. You met with Olaf Scholz as well. Nothing really seems to have come from that meeting or from the previous meetings that you've had. If Kosovo and Serbia can't even agree on license plates, how is there going to be any hope in the foreseeable future of coming up with a more fundamental agreement between the two countries?
Thank you very much for the invitation and for this opportunity. In process of talks with Serbia under auspices of Brussels, I've been committed, constructive and creative. We need a dialogue which will be a principled one between two equal parties for a legally binding agreement for full normalization of relations with Serbia centered on mutual recognition. Unfortunately, Serbia is saying that they will never recognize us, and in addition, they do not acknowledge crimes committed in the past. So, to be honest, the second offends and hurts us much more than the first. 23 years ago, we had NATO intervention in Kosovo and in former Yugoslavia to stop Serbia's genocide. 19 countries of NATO, 19 democratic countries, got together to bomb one country in Europe. It must have been very bad. They all had oppositions in their yards, but they got together to stop genocide of Milošević's regime in Kosovo. And I see here the core of the problem: denial of the crimes of the past, of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. However, we are trying hard in Brussels, together with Mr. Lajčák, to achieve agreements when it comes to car plates, with the principle of reciprocity, regarding electricity in the north, because energy is not being paid there by Serbs because of illegal structures of Serbia, not because of Serbian citizens. And also regarding enforced disappearances during the war, because we have still over 1,600 missing persons. However, Kosovo is a successful story of people's liberation struggle and hard work on one hand, and the aid of EU and US. We are very thankful for the democratic West, for the support throughout these years. We declared independence in 2008, 9 years after liberation. We got ICJ advisory opinion that declaration of independence did not violate international law. In 2012, 10 years ago, supervision of our independence has been lifted. 25 countries back then from democratic West decided that supervised independence of Kosovo must become full independence, and we cannot now go back in the past. We have to move forward. We believe that EU is our destiny. Europe is our continent. We have had an impressive growth last year, 10.53%. First time since the end of the war, we had a double-digit growth. FDI increased by 22%. Tax revenues by 34% without changing fiscal policy, because when people are hopeful, they rather spend than save. Plus, when they see that there is no corruption in the government, they are more ready to pay taxes. Exports increased by 83%. We came out as first in World Justice Project regarding rule of law in the Balkans. We rose by 17 places to World Press Freedom, according to Reporters Without Borders, and then again by 17 places, Transparency International Corruption Perception Index. So Kosovo is a successful story of combining economic development with qualitative democracy. And we look forward now from positive answer from Council of Europe. We have applied to become members. We have condemned from the very first day Russian aggression and invasion in Ukraine. And we have received 4 Ukrainian journalists who are now being sheltered in Kosovo and became residents of our capital town, Pristina. We need help from EU, and we consider that European Union is the most important historical process and political project of peace and prosperity since the Second World War, which we all have to strengthen and defend.
So one thing in your position that I think has caught people's notice is that you oppose membership in the Open Balkan initiative that has been spearheaded by Edi Rama in Albania, of course, and President Vučić. Why is that? Why do you think that this idea of a borderless Balkan region would be a bad idea for Kosovo now?
Western Balkan 6 is open towards EU and NATO and US and UK. I don't think that we should get open for some northeast or south superpower, east superpowers. So we're fine. And we rely very much on Berlin Process 2.0 now, with a new, fresh kickstart by Chancellor Scholz. We support regional initiatives with EU values inside and with EU mechanism to help us, not outside of EU. And I must say that neither as political orientation nor as cultural sensitivity, I do not belong to those leaders who believe in Balkan self-sufficiency. We belong to Europe, and we should become members of EU as soon as possible. When we won elections for the first time, and when it was obvious that negotiations will not be open for Albania and North Macedonia, it was then, in October 2019, when President of Serbia engaged in this initiative. I believe exploiting frustration of Albania and North Macedonia, and we know very well that Serbia is having much better relations nowadays with Russian Federation and China than with EU and US.
Well, as many of us have heard, there's also discussion in Montenegro about joining the Open Balkan Initiative. President Đukanović, your Prime Minister is going to Serbia next week to discuss this with President Vučić. What is your view? You've been a bit more skeptical about this idea. Is this something that you think could actually happen?
You are right. In Montenegro, which is the society that strives to be a democratic society, there are different opinions about numerous issues, including this issue as well. The good thing is that there is no difference between the government and the President and the Parliament about the strategic goal that we have. All of us wish Montenegro, as soon as possible, becoming a member of the European Union. We all recognize that on the path of dynamic reforms, Berlin process is helpful. Berlin process is a regional initiative launched in Berlin, as its name says, but it is a process that offers a really broad framework that includes a common regional market as well. And the framework of cooperation that really is based on European standards. But today, when I listen to the protagonist of the Open Balkan Initiative, and I listened a couple of days ago the statement of the President of Serbia, I heard him say that they have excellent cooperation between Serbia, Northern Macedonia and Albania, but we have a problem when we come to the border with Croatia or the border with the European Union. So that's the problem. Open Balkans is not based on European values. Open Balkans is based on a good initiative for regional cooperation, but instead of cooperation on any standards or based on any standards, and cooperation based on European standards that is underlined by the Berlin process, it's logical that we will choose Berlin process. That's why we have a mistrust towards the Open Balkans and what its purpose is. Why should we just double the initiatives? Instead of that, we should focus and use the capacity of the initiative, regional initiative like the Berlin process, which was already started years ago. My opinion is that the Open Balkans was started as an initiative when some countries and their leaders were resignated by the lack of effectiveness of the enlargement policy. So when they realized that the prospects for their countries in the European Union was uncertain, they started developing a parallel initiative that should serve as a kind of backup for the countries of the Western Balkans, which in their opinion would not have European prospects. That is something that I do not agree with. That's our fundamental difference. I believe that we are entitled to European prospects and to membership in the European Union, and we have to participate and should participate in all regional initiatives that improve our capacities and our cooperation so that in the near future we can take our seat in the European Union.
Well, speaking of which, I want to ask a related question. You, as I said before, are the longest-serving political leader in the region. Do you think that you will be president when and if Montenegro joins the European Union eventually? You have a presidential election coming up, I believe, in about 18 months. Will you run again?
Well, those are long-term forecasts. If our friends from China could hear us, they would make a joke because, you know, long-term for them has to be measured in centuries. But I'm talking from the point of view of the Balkans. This time that you ask for is a long-term perspective. So, at this moment, I do not think about my personal future. I mean, whether it will be in politics or in some other field. But what is important, and what I can tell you with certainty, is that on a daily basis, I keep working with the government on the efforts to de-block the negotiation process and to get the report that we actually met the interim benchmarks for the chapters 23 and 24, which is the field of rule of law, that it is registered in the annual progress report of the European Commission in October, and that in the Intergovernmental Conference in December this year, Montenegro can close several negotiation chapters and keep a good pace of progress towards the European Union and its position as a forerunner or leader in that process. My belief is that in a serious work of the government that I expect them to do, we should not be working on the negotiation chapters after 24. I believe that in 24, at certain moment, Montenegro will be able to say we are ready on the internal level and then expect the opinion of the European Union. Who is going to be in which position is less important, but I can with certainty say that I have been infected with this politics to that extent that it's not important where I will be and what I will be doing. I mean, I'm sure in one thing, that I will, in my full capacity, from any position, contribute and help Montenegro to reach its goal as soon as possible.
Okay, well, I will take that as a yes, you are going to run again. Sir Stuart, I'd like to come to you, another longtime watcher of the region, and I think something that is obvious today and in all of these discussions is that one country sort of looms large over this whole issue. This country is not represented here today, so we can say whatever we want. And that is, of course, Serbia, which has recently agreed to pipe in more Russian gas, has refused to join European Union sanctions against Russia, is also very close, increasingly close with China. I mean, this is a strange question to ask someone maybe whose country just left the European Union, but do you think that it is possible for other countries in the Union, in the Western Balkans rather, to join the EU without Serbia being part of the mix somehow?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. And of course, as Miroslav said at the beginning of this session, the war in our continent, started illegally by Russia, changes everything. And if we are to build resilience in a divided world, we have to work together. And I would also echo the thought on European values. And that's my answer to the question on Serbia. It's about values, and it's about doing the right thing in this situation on our continent. And of course, we can't predict in the context of GlobeSec what will happen next year, but we can see the pattern. And the other country we haven't mentioned here is Bosnia and Herzegovina, where we can see many risks, which, let's be honest, are long-term as well as exacerbated, made worse by the war that Russia has started. And so the British government has decided to focus on this region. We're offering more projects, because the third risk I can see, which I think affects all the countries here represented by their leadership, is the fact that for the people of the region, energy security is now a real issue. So for all those reasons, with the war and with the situation and the need to align around values, surely now is the time to work for that Euro-Atlantic future, including our friendship and our friends from the United States. And that means cooperating on everything through energy, infrastructure, transport, making life easier, better for the people that the leaders here represent, and the friends that I represent and the United States represents to the region, and have demonstrated that friendship for decades. And so, of course, it's easy to find all the things that divide, all the things that make things difficult, and there's a lot of the problems in the region are not new, let's be honest. But I think now, because of the situation in 2022, it's a wake-up call for cooperation on values, and the UK government continues to support the Euro-Atlantic journey for the whole region, all countries, and we will work with each of the leaderships and all the governments to try and achieve that. And it's not about our membership of the European Union. We're still in Europe as a continent, and we still continue to offer support through our programs and through our embassies across this region. But further division, I think, is dangerous, because, as we see, with when you started your question, I thought you were going to talk about Russia. Because Russia has in-place resources, ladies and gentlemen, to make the journey we're talking about harder. And they will use those resources in the situation we're in. Therefore, we need to work together and find a way to achieve better unity.
But Ambassador Lajčák, to come to you on this, I mean, isn't this exactly what Russia wants, that there is more division? There's this fear hanging in the air that, well, if Europe and the United States and the international community doesn't engage more in the Western Balkans, then they're going to gravitate towards Russia, they're going to gravitate towards China. They've already made inroads there. But engagement, you've been in this role for a couple of years now. There have been no shortage of initiatives over the years. Might it not be better to just ignore them for a while and let them work out their differences themselves? We were talking about the license plates before. I mean, you know, they can't solve that problem alone. Why do we need all of these special envoys and representatives and what have you?
Well, of course, this is what Russia wants, but we should not care about what Russia wants. We should care about what we want. And the question is, do we know what we want? Do we want what we say we want? I am not sure that this was the case for the last 5 or 10 years, and as a consequence, the region is less prepared for the membership in the European Union today than it was 5 years ago. Because it looks like we want the region to meet European standards before they will be allowed to start accession negotiations, which is absurd, because they should meet the standards through the process of accession. We are conditioning things which should be automatic. Opening chapters, starting accession negotiations, and then through a credible process which we own 100%, we will decide about the speed. Actually, they will decide about the speed by their performance, by the reforms. We have politicized, you know, the decision about now you get a candidate status, like North Macedonia 17 years ago. You can give a lecture how is it to be a candidate. Then we make a decision about starting accession negotiations. Then it takes another 2 years to actually start the accession negotiation. You know, this is a joke. This is not a process. So that's why we really need to be very serious. Give our partners a chance to prove how committed they are through the process of accession negotiations. And it's naive to think that you will meet European standards without a credible European perspective. So this is what, sometimes it seems that we are afraid of the process that we conceived and we fully own and fully control. And therefore, we should be less obsessed with what Russia wants or what China wants. Geopolitically, after the war in Ukraine, or the Russia's aggression in Ukraine, it will be a different geopolitical situation, a different world. If we want Europe to be a credible player, we need to have Western Balkans as part of the European Union. If we want to see ourselves still dealing with the Western Balkans, instead of really being a relevant player, then we will be out of this new game. And whether we need all these envoys, to be very honest, international community has been part of the problem as much as it has been part of the solution. We have done too much of political engineering and social engineering in the Balkans as well. We really need to keep it simple. It's one process, it's called enlargement. It has its clear rules, it's based on performance, on merits of the countries. Let's go back to basis and let's give the process a chance.
Right, and I do want to come to questions from the audience in a second, but this is exactly what I'm getting at. You're trying not to do what Russia and China want, but in the process it appears that you are creating conditions, or the EU is, that actually meet, you know, their ultimate goals. And I'm wondering, what do the likes of High Representative Borrell or Commission President von der Leyen say when confronted with these realities? What is the view in Brussels about this? Because everybody knows outside what's going on here.
2 points. First of all, Russia and China are logically using the space that we left open for them. But we have the capacity to fill the space. So if we decide not to do it, then of course we cannot be surprised that other actors enter, and we should not be concerned with them doing so. Second, the atmosphere in Brussels has changed significantly. As I said, 2 years ago, there was still this feeling of complacency. The region can wait, we don't need to hurry. Now, everybody understands the region cannot wait, we need to hurry up. There is a lot of commitment. There are EU Western Balkan summits every year. There are events when they are being invited. We will have another summit on the 23rd of June, EU Western Balkans.
Well, this is what I mean. There's no shortage of summits. They just seem to go nowhere.
The problem is how to turn this new momentum and this new will into new quality. And here we are still struggling, unfortunately.
I would like to open up to questions. Is there anyone who has? There's a young woman here in the front row. If we could get a microphone.
Thank you. I'm Eugenia. I'm native Albanian, and it's a pleasure and honor for me to be here. I represent the Youth Atlantic Treaty Association, and my question is more or less to all gentlemen in the panel. We all know that the process of enlargement has been fatigued, exhausted, and a lot of the public opinion, at least in Albania, has fallen down, and there is not much the trust and the belief that this integration process will come to an end soon. But my question is, as far as this relation is a two-way relationship between the European Union and the countries, what went wrong from the European Union part, not from these countries who are candidates? And is it time that the one-fits-all collective approach must come to an end and shift to a more tailored and specific approach to all different countries? Thank you very much.
I don't know who wants to take that question. Any volunteers? Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So this is a very valid question. So it is true that as soon as a process takes too long time, then the confidence in the process itself is falling down. And the credibility of the process is going down, and the relevance of the players inside the process is going down. So you exactly explained, as you in your question, practically the answer. So where the problem is, it's in the way of the approach. So whether you want to make a bold and swift decision to finish a certain process, or you just want to work around the process without a goal to finish it. So what has happened? A merit-based process, at least in our country, and I said for our country, and I said this at the beginning, a merit-based process on which all the resources are actually directed to work on, has become a typical political process. On the other side, there is no alternative. Because if you take the status of the economies in the Western Balkans, and by the way, at least one thing has been achieved, and this is that we were talking, and Miroslav knows about the Balkan and the Balkan Peninsula, and all of a sudden it became the Western Balkans, so where there is a West, there is a East. So we are talking about certain division, which I never liked, to be honest. And this is at least some of the non-positive achievements in this whole process of years and years of accession. And as soon as we have economies which 80%, and most of them are like this, foreign exchanges with countries of the European Union. 80% of the foreign direct investments are coming from the countries of the European Union. Most of the citizens of the countries from the Western Balkans which go abroad live and work in countries of the European Union. Then there is no other alternative. When we talk about no other alternative, we are talking about European values, and we are talking about the European fundamental four freedoms: the free trade of goods, services, capital, and movement of people. And when we talked about the Open Balkan is exactly practical implementation of the four freedoms. So it's a platform how to implement the four freedoms, because it is unusual and it is unprecedented that a goods produced in Elbasan would travel slower to North Macedonia and to Serbia than to Norway. And this was the case. This was the case. It is unprecedented that the only borders are on the Western Balkans. Because as soon as you go to Horgoš, to the Croatian borders, you don't have borders anymore up to Scandinavia. And that's what we are talking about. We are talking about practical implementation in the Open Balkans of the four freedoms. Why is it not going to be allowed for the people which are on a markets of 2 million, 4 million, 8 million to work on a market of 12 million. Why not? What's the problem in that?
Okay.
Why they not to have a higher GDP growth rates? See the GDP growth rates on annual basis in the last 30 years. It's not more than 2 to 2.5%.
Well, there are certainly many proponents of the open Balkan idea.
It's a practical
For those of us
implementation
who've
of the
driven
four
across the
freedoms.
region, it would make our lives much easier as well. President Đukanović, you wanted to pipe in there, and then I would like to get another couple of questions, please.
Well, we should remind here of something. The process of enlargement is an administrative and technical process, but it is also a political and geopolitical issue. It seems to me that Europe in the last years had a lack of attention towards the Western Balkans because it underestimated the political dimension and completely neglected the geopolitical dimension of that process. As a result of that, we have what we now have in the Western Balkans, a deep confusion with serious penetration of anti-European interests that we will have to deal with even after the war in Ukraine stops. I mean, eventually the war in Ukraine will end. But the Russian hybrid warfare in the Western Balkans that lasted at least 6 years left certain consequences. And if we want to make Western Balkan an organic part of European Union, that is the question that, or these are the consequences that we will have to deal in the years after the Ukrainian war. I just want to extend a warning here one more time. Frequently, European circles talk about Western Balkans or its European future like it is only a Balkan issue, but I think it is par excellence European issue. If Europe leaves in the Western Balkans or in any other pocket of Europe an empty space, a vacuum that Miroslav mentioned, space for anti-European policies to be active, that will make Europe less competitive. We may not forget, I think that we are faced with a new geopolitical organization. It is clear that Putin will not achieve his goal to bring us back to the times of the Cold War. But it is clear that this model of geopolitics that was built after the Cold War has shown serious deficiencies, and that now we are facing a new geopolitical architecture being made. And we would like to know primarily where Europe will be in that new geopolitical architecture, because we are Europeans. So if we don't understand that Europe will lose competitiveness if it is not united, if it is not stable, if it does not use all its resources, then we have a problem. So I think that the key problem is political problem. Because according to the messages that you can hear from different European addresses, you understand that in various places in Europe, they don't have the same view of the importance of unification of Europe.
Thank you, sir. I would like to go back to the audience, the young gentleman in the first row there. Mr.
Thank
Nič.
you, Matt, young gentleman. Milan Nič, German Council of Foreign Relations, originally from Slovakia. If you allow me, I have two related questions in the logic that President Đukanović just described. What you said before is that you expect from the European Council on the 20th Council meeting with the Western Balkan leaders on the 23rd of June is a clear message, clear way forward. Now, in between, in 2 weeks, the European Commission will publish its own opinion on the candidate status of Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. Will you, President Đukanović, and other two Balkan leaders come out in favor of, if that's a positive avi, of granting a candidate status to those who will get a positive opinion from the Commission? And the second question, let's dream about Globsec in 1 year. Now, in a few minutes, we will have presidents of Georgia and Moldova in a different panel, in a different room. Do you think if they will get a candidate status, there will be time to have a joint platforms between the Balkan and Eastern countries with the EU, for instance, at Globsec? Thank you.
I think that's for you, Mr. President. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Aha. Dakle, ja mislim da treba podržati
I think
status
that we
zemlje
should
kandidata
definitely
za
support the status of a candidate country for Ukraine, definitely.
jer status kandidata
Candidate
primarno
status
počiva na
primarily is based
političkom
on political
aspektu.
aspect.
I ja mislim da
And I
Evropa,
think that Europe,
razmišljajući geopolitički
thinking
o
in
svojim
geopolitical
konkurentima,
sense
koji su
about its
neki,
competitors,
kao što vidimo, vrlo
some of
agresivni,
whom are, as we can see, very aggressive, should send a clear message that Ukraine and other countries who want are desired as candidates for membership in the European Union. So that's when the process starts. We have to emphasize this. And Montenegro has been in this process for 10 years already. In 2012, we started negotiations with the European Union, and I am against any shortcuts for membership. When the European Union created once a shortcut for membership, I think they didn't achieve the goal. Neither the European Union nor the countries who got the shortcut. I think that Ukraine should be given a status of a candidate, and then after that we should continue, or European Union should continue insisting on reforms that should lead the country to achieve the standards on the basis of which the country can become a member. That's my question related to Ukraine, but does anybody want to answer the other question related to Georgia and Globsec and the combination of countries?
Lajčák, would you like to answer? Sorry.
Well, I can only repeat that, I mean, it's written in the treaties that the country, every country that shares the European values has the right to apply for membership, and then it's the process that shows whether the country meets the standards and the norms. So we should not politicize what is technical, and we should not make technical what is clearly political. So exactly as President Đukanović said, everybody should get the chance and should prove through the credible process, merit-based process, whether it meets the standards and the criteria.
I do want to take a couple more questions, but I just wanted to ask you quickly, Sir Stuart, you said before that Russia obviously has changed the entire dynamic here. What, though, do you think would happen if Russia loses the war, which I think most of the people in this room hope will happen? What would that mean for the Western Balkans? A Ukrainian victory?
Well, it means they can live up to the European values, and of course, in that scenario you paint, there'd have to be a peace process, and then the whole of Europe could work together, as we're trying to do in the answer to these questions. And I think that is the goal. It seems distant today, sitting here in Bratislava. Of course it does, but we have to think that way.
But in terms of Russian influence over the region, what do you think it would mean?
All of the sovereign countries in the region understand their own degrees of influence. I mean, the British government is very grateful to those that are supporting sanctions, as indeed we all should be, and we continue to look at ways of making Russian activity more visible. And again, we encourage all like-minded, values-based sovereign states to do the same. I think for too long, if I may, for too long, Russia has been allowed to do things in this region and elsewhere in Europe without consequence.
Do you think, a related question to you, Ambassador Lajčák, we're running out of time, but just maybe a quick answer. Will European troops remain in Bosnia after November? This is something a lot of people are wondering.
Will what? Sorry.
Will European troops remain in Bosnia after
I hope so.
November?
I hope so. They have been doing a great job, and they have always been supported and appreciated by everyone, all constituent people and the entire citizenship of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So this should not be a problem. This should not be a question. It has been made a problem right now, but I really hope we will solve this problem before November.
Okay. I think we have time for one or two more questions here in the second row. The gentleman. There's a microphone coming to you there. Yeah.
Hello, Matthew Rhodes from the George C. Marshall Center. Stuart Peach mentioned cooperation also with the United States in addressing challenges within the Western Balkans region. I'd be interested from each of the panelists to being as specific as possible. What would you like to see the United States doing or not doing to contribute to addressing challenges in the region?
Maybe we could start this one with Prime Minister Kurti and then come to Prime Minister Kovachevski.
I think some of the consequences that we have today are due to the favoring of political stability over democratic reforms. We need rule of law, anti-corruption, we need social justice, we need dealing and facing with the past, we need reciprocity of minority rights, we need equality, and in this way, EU will be homegrown in all the 6 countries of Western Balkans.
But the question was about Washington and the United States, and hasn't Washington sent mixed signals throughout this process in recent years? If you think of the Washington Agreement, I think, which just expired last November, where you agreed not to seek international recognition, and Serbia also agreed not to block you. That's run out. That didn't go anywhere. The initiatives during the Trump presidency didn't really go anywhere, and I think some people on the panel might argue that they were counterproductive.
Well, we had previous administration which was seeking a quick fix, a snap deal, and didn't turn out that well. But what I'm emphasizing is not to favor political stability over democratic reforms. And US and EU can both cooperate to this end. Concretely, I believe that rule of law, fighting organized crime, which is cross-border, there is such thing as Balkan mafia, and we should all cooperate, and we need the help of EU and US to fight it. And we need countries with democracy where opposition can win. I was in opposition for many years and I won the elections. Next time, someone else might win the elections. We need to have EU values helped by EU itself, but they must be homegrown. And to this end, I think that also EU has a lot to do in strengthening continental welfare state, because social justice is important, anti-fascism, because there has been appeasement with different proto-fascist forces in EU, and we need NATO in 21st century, not less than in 20th century.
Thank you very much. We have 2 minutes left. Prime Minister Kovachevski, I want to give you the last word on this question, which is also central to the region. Is the EU cooperating well with the United States? Is this partnership working, or is it just creating more problems?
This war in Ukraine, with the attack of Russia, has showed a clear unity between the European Union, between the countries which share European values and which have implemented full democracy within themselves, together with the United States. And this can be clearly seen through the alignment of the NATO alliance with the European Union alliance. And also in the case of my country, we have, even that we are not members of the European Union, we have fully aligned our foreign policy with the foreign policy of the European Union, because the decision is whether you are on the right side of history and whether you are on the side of democracy in war with autocracy. United States have been the strategic partner of the region and of North Macedonia within the 30 years of our independence in any field of the development of the country, because let's not forget that the countries of former Yugoslavia are countries of discontinuity because of the change of the political system, change of the economic system, change of the country itself, because it was practically coming new countries out of a federation. And also there were the Yugoslavian wars which were again discontinuity. In this process of rebuilding, of regaining trust in the region, United States have played a very valuable and significant role. And to prove this even more, even this week, the delegation of North Macedonia in the fields of foreign affairs, security, defense, culture, and economy is in Washington on a level of ministers in a strategic dialogue with the United States, out of which there will be concrete activities which will be worked on.
I'm afraid we're going to have to end it with that very diplomatic answer from the Prime Minister on the role of the United States and the EU in the region. Seems we could use maybe a bit more of that diplomacy in some of the other discussions. Thank you very much to the gentlemen on the panel. It was very interesting for me at least, and I hope for the audience. I would also like to let you know that the next session begins straight away. It will be led by Steve Clemons and begins with this short film. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Steve Clemons.
Hi, everyone. If I can ask you to take your seats. We're going to begin here. Joining me right now on stage, we have the Prime Minister of Georgia, Irakli Garibashvili, and I think we will have behind us, not his big brother, but his big sister, we'll have the President of Moldova, Maia Sandu. Maia, it's great, Madam President, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have this very conversational, and we will forget that you're actually not in the room. We're going to make this very much like you are in the room. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Prime Minister, why don't you have a seat? If I can ask the gentleman in the front to take a seat, please. Great, thank you. And thank you all. And I'm going to encourage everyone to post your questions on the app, the GlobeSec app. These are fed to me right here in this. We'll also be taking questions in this room, and we'll try to be as interactive as we can. We've got a good 40 minutes that we can have a very solid discussion on solidifying the neighborhood partnership with Eastern allies, which is really to look at two of the key nations that really have been on the fault lines for a long time. As I look at the Prime Minister here, Prime Minister Garibashvili, in a way, the foreshock of much of what has been discussed at GlobeSec with Russia's incursion into Ukraine, the foreshock of that is Russia's incursion into Georgia in 2008. As I look at the president in Moldova, we can't help but notice that many people worry about the future course of Moldova, and that's what makes this discussion about inclusion in the EU, inclusion in NATO, inclusion in international institutions so vital and important. So let me just start with the Prime Minister, and it's great to see you. I'd like to just know, as we sit in this highly tense time, what's your up-at-night issue? What is your biggest burning priority as you look at your desk every day that you have to solve?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting us. It's a great opportunity to talk about the Georgian story, Georgia's achievements, problems and challenges that we have in our country. So, first of all, I want to tell you very briefly Georgian experience and Georgia's story. Over the past several years, we have implemented very ambitious reforms since 2012 in all directions. Judiciary, media freedom, rule of law, consolidating democracy. And in 2014, we signed the association agreement. And this is a master plan for our country, a master plan for Georgia's Europeanization and modernization. And since then, of course, we have achieved some tangible results. And I'll tell you a few examples. The free trade agreement with the European Union, the visa-free regime, and just recently now we applied officially the application for EU membership. This is a historic decision. And of course, when I'm talking about the integration and the path that we're together with our people pursuing, this is the decision of our people. Georgian people believes that we are part of European family. Georgia belongs to Europe. Of course, now we're waiting for the decision of the European Commission regarding
when is that expected?
The candidacy. We believe that we are doing everything. We have achieved, as I said, tangible results. Let's take the association agreement. 45% of the agreement has already been fulfilled. The DCFTA, all kind of progress. The progress is remarkable, and Georgia has been a front runner. I would not exaggerate to say that Georgia has always been a front runner of the Eastern Partnership countries. So, therefore, it is a crucial time, especially when we see a full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine. This is a historic moment. So now it's up to European Union to decide whether Europe stands by its allies, by its partners, like-minded countries. So this is, again, I want to say that very crucial and challenging time. So, and as you know, Georgia experienced the war in 2008.
Right.
Way before Ukraine.
You were the foreshock.
Way before Crimea.
The first war.
And all this. And we paid the highest price. So who paid the price? Georgian people paid the highest price. Even in the 90s, we had two wars with Russia.
Right.
After we gained the independence, regained the independence. So therefore, this is our determination. This is our choice. Civilizational choice, I would say.
Well, before I jump to Madam President, can you tell me very quickly what your gut feeling is? Do you feel like the EU is leaning into this? Are they trying to help you and they get to yes, or do you feel there is some recalcitrance, some hesitation on the EU side from your perspective?
Well, I don't want to speculate on...
But you have a gut feeling on...
Of course, we talk out with our friends, with our European friends, and I personally talk with my colleagues, and I had multiple meetings with them, multiple phone calls, and I was in Brussels, in fact, 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, and I met with all the leadership. And of course, my message is that with the Georgian side, we have done our homework. Now we're waiting for the decision of the European Union. So we have to understand this is a political decision, right? Granting the status or not. This is political, this is strategic, but this is moral as well, and this is symbolic. So what kind of message are we sending out to, for example, Russia?
Right.
Let's take Georgia. I want to talk about my country. I don't want to talk about my country, but Georgia has been loyal to European values, standards, fundamental values of European Union, and we have paid the highest price possible. And we are pursuing our reform. We're doing all the progress in every direction. So we signed the association agreement, free trade, visa-free. Now the application has been submitted. So now it's up to Europe to decide.
Madam President, I'd love to ask you the same thing. What is your highest priority right now in Moldova? You know, as you are dealing with the priorities every day that matter, I guess one of the things I'm trying to convey to our audience today, both in this room and online, is the sense of consequence over these decisions regarding the EU, that they are extraordinary and they matter. I think sometimes, on the other side of the equation, the so-called west side of the equation, there can be a kind of ambivalence, but maybe we do this, maybe we don't. Tell us why your priority should be our priority. You're muted. Okay, there you go. Go ahead.
Thank you for the invitation, and sorry I was not able to be there in person. We have many concerns, and we had lots of challenges even before the war. Now the external crises are making things even more difficult. Of course, safety and security are big concerns for us, given that we are very close to the war zone, the economic hardship, the energy crisis. All these problems are serious problems for Moldova, as they are for many other countries. We're also trying to do our part in terms of helping the Ukrainian refugees. But when we talk about why this decision, a positive answer to our application, a positive answer from EU is important to us, it is important because our democracy depends on that. Because in our part of the world, in our region, democracy long-term can survive only if Moldova, Ukraine and Georgia will become part of EU. Such are the realities of our region, and such are the realities of the geopolitics. We have been dreaming of becoming a EU member for a long time. We have been planning to submit the application. Of course, we submitted it now in this dramatic situation because things became more evident that we can be safe, that we can save our democracy, that we can make plans in Moldova only if we become one day part of the EU. And remaining in this buffer zone, in grey area, is a very bad news for us, and that's why we're trying to get a positive sign from EU. And it's also important short term, especially since we are facing the security challenges. I have to answer people every day, young people, journalists, investors. When they ask me, are they safe? I tell them they're safe today, but I'm not sure what's going to happen in 2 or 3 months from now. And to convince these people to give themselves a chance in Moldova, and we need them because Moldova already lost 1 million people, and to make the country attractive and to convince these people to continue to help us with reforms, and we have many things to do. I need to give them, we need to have good news for them. And the good news would be the light at the end of the tunnel, that even though the country is not in a good situation now, the region is very unstable, and unfortunately it will continue to be unstable for some time. Having the clear plan and having the status candidate would send a signal to all these people that even though things are very difficult today, they're going to be difficult tomorrow. One day, Moldova is going to become part of the safe world.
Madam President, let me ask you this question. I'm going to try to be tactful. Do you find your interlocutors on integration with the EU, as I asked the Prime Minister, bought in, leaning in, trying to help? Or do you find them in America, and you graduated from the John F. Kennedy School in Harvard, so that you're getting a lot of thoughts and prayers from the West, which means not much, with all due respect to our member of the clergy here in the front. But are you getting thoughts and prayers for Moldova's future, or are you getting tangible, helpful, proactive partnership?
We have been getting support from you all these years. When we were fighting against an oligarchic regime and trying to save democracy, EU was next to us helping. EU is helping today when we are facing the refugee crisis and the consequences of the war in Ukraine. I do understand this is a difficult political decision, and I do understand that different countries have different views. At the same time, this is a geopolitical decision, and it should be seen like that, because just granting us the candidate status doesn't mean accepting us into EU. We're not looking for a shortcut. We recognize we have a long way to go. All our counterparts in EU see that our reform efforts are genuine, and we are working hard on reforming justice, and we are very committed on fighting corruption and building strong institutions, because corruption has been a big problem for the country, and we are committed and we're working hard on improving business environment. So our counterparts in EU do see our efforts as genuine. Their concerns are of a different nature, but again, as I said, we're not looking for shortcuts. They should see this as a geopolitical opportunity, and they just should give us the chance. And then it should be the meritocracy, and the countries which have the chance will have the time to show how quickly they can implement the commitments that they've made towards EU. So this is what we're asking. We're asking for this chance.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Prime Minister, and again, I'm going to try to be tactful here, but I think a lot of concerns in Europe, in the EU, which is a values-based agreement across these nations, is that nations sometimes get in and that the values arrangements they had made are ones they forget. And it becomes complicated in that relationship. We don't have to call out nations in this particular case, but some are pretty close to here. And so I guess in that arrangement, how does that affect the the solvency, if you will, of what you're talking about, a values-based agreement, of bringing Georgia forward so that you can communicate that Georgia will not be a nation that slips in those commitments?
Well, first of all, I think we have to make it very clear. So today we are talking about the candidacy, right? About the candidate status.
Right.
We're not talking about the membership.
Right.
We understand, as President also mentioned, we're not we're not looking for a shortcut, or we're not looking for something that is for granted, for free. We understand it's a long process.
Right.
We understand we have to continue all our reforms, and we took commitments. We'll continue all these reforms. But today, the question is about granting the candidate status or not. And it's a message. It is a message to all of us, to all our nations. It's a message to Russia as well. So from our side, I want to repeat. So we have implemented all these reforms. We have strengthened democratic institutions. We are one of the best performers, best reformers in the wider region, not only in our region, but in the wider region. In terms of transparency, accountability, or media freedom, rule of law, judicial reforms. Let's take, for example, several days ago, according to World Bank, Georgia is #1 in terms of budget transparency, or doing business, or in every direction, Georgia has been the best performer. So now, then my question is that why not? I mean, granting the candidate status would give us additional motivation. This will be a recognition of our progress that we achieved. But again, of course, we understand that it's a working process. We will continue all the reforms. And we will be motivated. We will be in shape always, And of course, there will be a monitoring mission from the European Union. It's not a one-day, let's say, decision, right? It's a long process till we achieve the full-fledged membership. So therefore, I would still repeat the same. We expect wise decision from the European Union. Because let's be very open and frank here. Russia, when invaded Georgia in 2008, at that time the world thought maybe the context was different and this and that. Let me remind everyone that since 2008, no one in this world imposed sanctions on Russia. No one. On the contrary, we saw some new restart, recharge, or refresh, or all kind of new relationship with Russia, right? In 2014, the world was shocked.
So in your view, that became a green light?
That's right, when Russia annexed Crimea. And again, just recently, the whole world was surprised and shocked when Russia invaded Ukraine. So I mean that the answer from the West must be adequate, must be relevant, must be proportional. So in today's time, difficult times, if the European Union leaves all these countries, like-minded partners, and associated trio like Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, without granting the symbolic, let's say, candidate status, I would not hesitate to say that this would be a mistake. Because from our side, we have done everything, and we're doing, and we're committed to do and continue all the reforms. So.
Let me ask Madam President one last question. We're going to go to our questions on Slido and to all of you who have questions coming in on the GlobeSep app. So thank you very much. Madam President, Francis Fukuyama has said recently, I interviewed him recently, and he said that in his view, democracies became lazy. They became inattentive to what it took to build, keep, maintain democracy in all of its forms. That means is respect for political minorities as well as those who win. And that Ukraine today is reminding a generation of people who did not have any experience with the Cold War what fighting for democracy, sovereignty, freedom is. And so that to the degree that, he was talking about Americans, are tuning in, they're getting that. You came in and you won an election based on pivoting to the Western course, Western values, democracy. Vladimir Putin and many people around him, whom I've interviewed, have said they see democracy as fading out, as dying, as suffering. And I am just wondering how the average Moldovan citizen is feeling right now, looking at what is happening in Ukraine. They elected you, but what are they feeling in their gut about this moment? And are Western democracies, in Francis Fukuyama's term, too lazy?
Well, it is true that we have to fight more for democracy, that things are not given for granted. But in my country, we have been fighting for democracy all these years, especially because we are in this gray area, in this buffer zone. And I am actually proud of the Moldovans because we haven't allowed an authoritarian regime to settle here for years. Yes, that was not easy. We had to fight in the streets. We had to, even to build political parties from scratch, like I did together with my team, and to prove what real democracy means. And to us, we had to prove that democracy is about transparent and legal financing of political parties, that democracy can be done without the ownership of TV channels and so on. So we actually had to show to people what democracy is, and it can be done through clean politics. And we got people's support for this type of political parties and for this type of governance. But then now we have these huge external challenges. So, of course, there is the risk that Moldovans can be disappointed even after so much effort in such a difficult environment and in a difficult region, we will not get enough support to stay part of the free world. Right. But yes, I do believe that the entire world, no matter whether you are in a developed, consolidated democracy or in a fragile democracy like Moldova, will have to increase our efforts to defend democracy. And I believe that this is what this decision of the EU is about when I say that this is a geopolitical decision, because this is about helping 3 more countries to stay part of the democratic world, or just leaving them, and then we don't know what would be the chances. As I said, in this part of the world, the sustainability of the democracy depends on the EU decision.
Did you want to respond?
Yes, I would add a few more words regarding Georgia's wish to become a member of the European Union. We're talking to European friends, and I want to make it very clear. Georgia is not a country which is asking always for something for free, something for granted, but we do also contribute. And I'll give you a few examples. Several years ago, we decided to send our troops to Central African Republic. This was a hard decision, difficult decision, because why?
Is this your first out-of-area deployment of troops?
That's right. This was an EU-led operation in Central African Republic, and this was a difficult decision. We sent 1 battalion. More than 500 troops were sent to Central African Republic to help our European friends. So what I mean is that we always contribute, and we Georgia and Georgians are always where Europe needs us, where the world, where the international community needs us. Or let's say NATO, let's take NATO operations and Georgia's participation in NATO operations. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, we have 2,000 troops.
Right.
More than 35 our brave soldiers died, sacrificed their lives to this international idea to fight against terrorism and to fight for the peace and security, to the global peace and security.
Right.
So I mean that, and more than 500 soldiers were severely injured. So my last comment is that Georgia is not asking for something for free, for granted, but we are asking for fair treatment.
Let me pose a question, both of you, from Anton. Excuse me, Anton, this is going to be a tough one. Bendar Zevsky. He asked, could you comment, please, on the public opinion in your countries towards Russia and the European Union, and if the polarized public can destabilize the situation in Moldova and Georgia? And I should just add, both of you have Russian troops within your national boundaries. So does that become something that helps you in your efforts to promote democracy in the areas of the country that they do not occupy, or does it become a constant challenge and threat and reminder? Let me start with Madam President.
Well, the polls show that today between 60 and closer to 70% of Moldovans would like the country to become a member of the EU. We had an important share of population which wanted good relations with Russia. Things have changed since Russia started the aggression against Ukraine, so this figure has reduced. But we do have a strong popular support for the EU integration agenda. And this is despite the propaganda, and Moldova has been subject to very extensive propaganda. We are trying to take measures now to protect people, but of course this is a problem not easy to solve. Of course, the Russian troops on our territory are a big problem. This goes against our constitution, against our independence, and this is a vulnerability, especially now with the war in Ukraine. This has become a much bigger problem. We are trying, of course, to do our best to keep things quiet, but that's a very big problem for us.
Thank you. Mr. Prime Minister?
Well, I have to say that more than 80% of Georgian population support European integration, Euro-Atlantic integration, and I have to say that this is the choice, again, I want to repeat, of our people. And we didn't start this journey just 3 years ago. This has always been a dream, a wish, a desire of our people, of our ancestors, centuries ago. So in terms of challenges, of course, the biggest challenge is, of course, the occupation, ongoing occupation. 20% of our territory is occupied by Russia. And we live together with the Russian troops on our territory. They're based like 40 kilometers away from my office, from the capital city, Tbilisi. So therefore, of course, Georgia is vulnerable. Of course, Georgia is in a very difficult situation. But regardless, of course, we have been very loyal to our fundamental, let's say, principles, values, and to our dedication to become a member of the European Union and NATO. So therefore, I have to repeat again.
Do you train your citizens in the kinds of potential combat you're seeing unfold in Ukraine right now, worrying that Russia may step over those lines? I think it's been impressive. When I was in Estonia recently, in Tallinn, they're training their people, their regular citizens, in the kind of potential combat that you're seeing in Ukraine today. And I'm just interested in if
training
you're doing
to
that.
do what? To counter
to fight if you get invaded, if you get
unfortunately, no one experienced the war with Russia in the European Union. We experienced this 3 times already.
Right.
2 in the 90s when we regained independence. We had wars in Abkhazia and Ossetia, in these 2 breakaway regions, and then in 2008, large-scale war. But we know the price of the war. Therefore, peace and stability is the most important achievement of our government. And this is the only period Georgia has had a long-term peace and stability in our country. Of course, we are doing everything to maintain peace and stability.
Well, thank you. Let's take this question from this gentleman right here in the second row. And if you'll identify yourself, please.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Marko Nemet from Slovakia. I have just a quick question for both of you, basically. I want to just ask, where do you see your countries in the upcoming 5 to 10 years in the EU? And if yes, then what's need to be done from your side, from your country? Thank you very much.
Why don't we go to Madam President first? What are the steps you need to take for membership in the EU?
We need to do exactly what we promised to our people at the elections, to build a strong state, to eliminate corruption from state institutions. We have started the reforms in the injustice. We are starting now with the vetting process of judges and prosecutors. We are improving the business environment because we need to provide people with economic opportunities, attract investments. We need to solve the issues in the energy because of Moldova's dependence on Russia on energy. We need to build alternatives, and of course we're exploring the green energy.
Right.
So the same things that we have promised to our people and that our citizens are expecting from us. These are the things that the EU wants us to do. So we have common objectives, and this makes it easier for us to actually achieve them. As I said, the external challenges are making it a little bit more difficult, but no matter the external challenges, we continue the reform process.
Right. Mr. Prime Minister, I think you've laid out a number of things you've already done, but is there anything you didn't mention that you're still on the list?
Well, I think I would add a few more words. Georgia is a natural European country, European state. And again, I would say that we have this, constitution, which is the association agreement, which is the master plan. So we know exactly what we should do, and we're of course pursuing these reforms, and we took commitments, and we know how to transform our country and make it into a real European state. So after 5-10 years, of course, we see ourselves in Europe, as in European Union. After 10 years, of course, this is our dream and this is our wish.
Thank you. Right here. Yes, hi. I don't know if your microphone is on. Are we hearing the... Nope.
Yeah.
There we go.
Again, Konstantin Eget, Deutsche Welle. My question is both to the Madam President and to Mr. Prime Minister. Do you think that the EU candidate status, if it is acquired, will serve as a kind of security guarantee from any kind of Russian armed action against your countries? And very brief follow-up to Madam President, if I may. Do you think, or rather, do you count on Romania coming to your aid in case of Russian military action?
Thank you. Madam President?
Well, we do believe that it will be safer if we get a positive decision by EU. And again, this is precisely why we submitted the application now, after this war has started. We are concerned about our security. We have been discussing such situations. I mean, if something like that happens, we have been discussing this with Romania and with other partners that Moldova has. And we do hope, even though we don't have very clear answers, we do hope that we'll get support. But we are doing our best to try to keep Moldova out of the war, to keep peace here.
And Mr. President, I'd like you to answer it, but as you do answer it, I also want to ask, how cataclysmic would it not to have that accepted by the EU?
Well, I think we should, again, clarify this issue, because this is a very important question. The question was whether the candidate status will give security guarantees. Of course not. Now, we're not here to talk about the security guarantees, right? The only organization that I know in the world that provides security guarantees is NATO. Today, here, we're talking about the candidate status, which is symbolic, but meaningful, of course. For us, this is meaningful. Therefore, my answer is, of course, not. The candidate status will not provide security guarantees to neither Georgia nor Moldova or Ukraine, but this is rather an encouragement and will give more motivation to the countries to continue its reforms.
Well, thank you. But we have a question again from the app, and this is to President Sandu. Do you think that Moldova's constitutional neutrality is sustainable in light of the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, the constitutional
And I should say this is
neutrality-
from Gergo Ilis. So Gergo, thank you. Madam President, go ahead.
The constitutional neutrality is not respected by Russia because they have Russian troops stationing here illegally. So no, I don't believe that the neutrality in constitution protects us. This has been the decision of the people when the constitution was voted. I have to say that still a large part of the population believes that neutrality should be preserved, and we respect the will of the people, but we are concerned and we understand the risks to our security and our safety, and are trying to do our best. In the meantime, we're trying to consolidate a little bit our defense system, talking to the EU. EU has a new initiative, the Initiative for Peace, talking to our partners. But again, we believe we need to be part of a bigger family to feel safe.
Thank you. Let's take a question right here. Yes, hi.
Yeah, Meritbased, thank you very much for doing this. Twofold question. One is there anything that you wish to be seeing or getting, particularly from America and Washington at the moment? And to what extent do you think domestic polarization is hindering Georgia in this process that we're talking about?
You mean U.S. domestic polarization?
No, Georgian.
Georgian domestic polarization. Mr. Prime Minister.
Well, the polarization is everywhere. In every country. This is Georgia's politics is full of emotions. We have been trying to de-escalate, to minimize the polarization. And I think today we have a pretty stable political environment, political stability, economic stability. We have very good and strong economic growth. Last year we had 10.4% economic growth. This year, first quarter, we have 14.4% economic growth. Well, of course, the opposition is everywhere. The job of the opposition is to criticize the government, which is very normal. We have lots of opposition parties in the parliament. We have 9 parties in the parliament. We have lots of opposition TV channels. The media outlet is very, let's say, diversified. As to the first question, what Georgia can ask the U.S., I want to say that America has helped Georgia since we regained our independence significantly. More than $6 billion was donated to Georgia over the last 3 decades. And U.S. has been very generous in supporting Georgian defense forces, providing weapons, training our military personnel, our soldiers, and supporting us on our way towards Euro-Atlantic integration, our path, strengthening democratic institutions, and so on. And we have very good cooperation and truly strong partnership and friendship, and of course we will continue this strategic relationship with America.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do now is take 2 questions. I got them both right here because I fear this gentleman if I don't get him in, but we'll take these 2 questions and then wrap here. Go ahead real quick.
Thank you so much. I will be brief. Pavel Havlicek from Association for International Affairs. I have a question to you, Mr. Prime Minister. You said that you like to talk about your country, and that you also asked us why Georgia shouldn't be given, why not to give Georgia candidacy status. My question is, and I will be taking us back to last year actually, 11th of July, when a journalist and cameraman was killed in the middle of Tbilisi during the Tbilisi Pride when attacked by the far-right riots. Your government did nothing to protect the activists. Will your government this year repeat the same mistake, or will it really stand up for European values? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Elmar Brock right here. Elmar, I don't think your mic's on.
Technology is nothing for man.
Okay. Good friend, go ahead.
Dear President, dear Maia, dear Prime Minister, I think candidate status should be given. And I believe that it's needed that this does not become in the future, especially towards Ukraine, as a negotiation chip of the man in Moscow. But that does not mean membership in the immediate future. What do you think about that? That the association agreements all three countries have, could be developed to something like a European Economic Area, so to have step-by-step progress of the integration process, where the citizens of your country feel as a progress, not do the same mistake as we do in the Western Balkans, look only for membership and nothing happens for 30 years.
Let me ask Madam President to take that question first.
Thank you very much for the support and thank you for the suggestion. I think it's a very good idea. First of all, Moldova benefited enormously from the neighborhood policy. Today, 2/3 of Moldovan exports go to EU. I was just trying to imagine what it would have meant if 2/3 were going to the east, to Russia, like 10 years ago before the Eastern Partnership, and what this would have meant now for the country. So EU is also stability in terms of economy. And by the way, even Transnistria region, which also benefits from the free trade regime with the EU, now exports half of its goods and services to EU. So this is also helping integrating even the Transnistrian region. So I do believe that this is a good idea. I also believe it's a good idea to have this political community that President Macron was talking, if this is a step towards accession and not a replacement. So any such initiatives would, of course, help, and we would support and appreciate them.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Prime Minister, feel free to respond to both questions.
Okay. Well, first question from the gentleman. First of all, I have to remind you all that in 2014, we adopted the anti-discrimination law to eradicate all kind of discrimination. And to be honest with you, it's not a problem. And of course, in many countries, even in the member states of the European Union, there are some issues, there are some challenges related to these issues. But this information is not correct. The gentleman said that the operator was killed during this confrontation. I don't want to bother you with all the details here, but I will tell you very briefly. The police arrested more than 30 people who attacked the journalists, operators, and they are prosecuted. They are in jail. This is the obligation of the state to protect every single citizen, regardless their orientation or something like that. And again, I want to remind you that the law that exists in Georgia protects every citizen. Regarding the second question from Mr. Bruck, thank you very much. Nice to see you, sir. Given candidate status, of course, I agree with you, and I've said this, does not mean given membership. So we should not be afraid of giving this encouragement, this motivation to these young democracies, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine. And let's imagine that EU does not give the candidate status. Who will be happy in this world because of that? Only Russia. But look, what is the example? What is the message that we're spreading in the countries surrounded in our region and beyond in the wider region? That these countries have been loyal, they've been doing all the reforms, they signed association agreement, visa-free, which is tangible and which our citizens really use, and we are absolutely grateful. A free trade agreement. Now they submitted this application, and all of a sudden, the European Union decided not to give them this symbolic but meaningful status. Again, I think this will be a mistake. And I think we should convince our European friends to give candidate status to all three countries.
Well, listen, I want to thank both of you, thank the audience very much. I'm very happy a question did come up about, in this case, which LGBTQ rights, but it's about rights across the board. And I once told someone, when I was studying the European Union a long time ago on whether its expansion was good or bad, it kind of reminded me of the old Star Trek movie. This may sound weird, where the bad folks in the Star Trek movie were the Borg, and you either assimilated with them or you got wiped out. And to a certain degree, the Europeans and the way they assimilate and have been able to assimilate other cultures and bring other cultures into a code of consistency and consistent standards and rights has since I once wrote that paper many years ago, had become very, very impressive. And I understand why this is such a high stakes and important issue for both Georgia and Moldova. Please give a round of applause to Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili of Georgia and President Maia Sandu. Thank you both so much. I will tell everyone that we'll be back at the Danube stage at 10 minutes after 4. There's a coffee break now. Thank you all for joining us. Sorry we couldn't get to more questions.